Welcome to the Bret Boone podcast. I am Bret Boone, and today on the show, SNY's Andy Martino. He's got a new book coming out. It's called The Yankee Way. It's a behind-the-scene look at everything New York Yankees. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andy Martino to the show. Andy, thanks for coming on the program.
Bret, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, all right. Let's establish your day-to-day job is you cover the Yankees and the Mets. I think this is your second book.
That's right. I wrote a book about the Astros scandal as well, and sort of a history of sign stealing that went along with it. So this is my second book, and this one does, as you said, focus on the decades of Yankee history that Brian Cashman's been a part of, right up to the current time.
Share with the Boone podcast the premise of the book. I guess you just mentioned that. When did you decide to write it?
Bret, as I was writing the first book, Cheated, and the Yankees were swept up in that, obviously, as the victims of the Astros. I've been covering Cashman in the front office and the team for many years, but I learned more about that organization sort of as an aside to what was going on with the Astros in that era. And I thought this is a whole interesting story in itself because the Yankees have a continuity that to me really tells a story of the history of the evolution of the game over the past few decades. There are no front offices that can trace their philosophies and their personnel back to the 70s in the way that Gene Michael to Brian Cashman to the things that are still, although adapted for the current age, are going on now. When Cashman got there as an intern in 1987, the way they were getting their minor league reports in New York in the offices, Cashman's answering listening to an answering machine, not even a voicemail. Hey, this is Wally Moon, manager of Prince William. Andy Stankiewicz was 1 for 4. Game time temperature was 72 degrees. Right. Cash is writing it down. Now they have TrackMan and biomechanical cameras and all this stuff. So the game has taken this huge leap. And so to look at that through the lens of the Yankees and Brian Cashman, not just how successful they are, but just that line of continuity through the way the game has changed so much, I thought was interesting. And I've known Brian a long time. It actually wasn't easy to convince him to be interviewed at length because I guess we'd have to ask him, but we know that he can be guarded. But I eventually did wear him down and talk him into being interviewed. I interviewed as many other people as I could, past, present, and future of the organization, including, of course, your brother Aaron, who is, I think, a key and underrated figure in the modern Yankees story. So that's really how it came about. It was around 2021. I started that in earnest, convincing Brian to be interviewed, and kind of went from there.
It is a close-knit organization, and you're right. It's not like this is easy to write this book. You've got to kind of hit some loopholes to get that unfettered access. Brian's been, probably I think he is the longest tenured general manager in all of baseball now. And when you talk about those stories and you talk about the call-ins, that was my time too. In 1990, when I was drafted, I remember being an A-ball, and after the game, I'd walk by the manager's office, and my manager was Jim Nettles. Craig and Jim Nettles. Obviously Craig's brother, left-handed pitcher. And I remember walking by his office and hearing those phone calls, like so-and-so, and if you had a good game, it's like, you better talk good about me tonight. You better talk good about me tonight. But
I love that.
I remember those days where that's how it was. And, I think there was some actual work where you put pen to paper, send it in for the meetings. But if they needed tonight's game report, like right now, who knows? Maybe somebody was getting called up. Maybe somebody was going from A-ball to AA. The guy goes from AA to AAA to replace that guy that's going to the big league. So it's a real interesting dynamic how everything really works. Yeah. All the people you sat down with a lot. I think you wanted to sit down with some guys that didn't sit down with you. But what did you find in the organization, maybe from a management standpoint, not necessarily player? What was the common theme with all of them?
The common theme, I would say, was a loyalty to Cashman. And if you want to take it into the current day to Aaron, that and a praise of them, which exceeds the way the public perceives these people on a day in and day out basis. Now, I did not come across a single Yankees executive, like present or past, that really had a critical word to say. Now, players, it can be a different story because Cashman views it as his job to stand up to players sometimes, to protect the organization. And sometimes that involves a conflict with players. But in terms of people that have worked with him and under him in his department, there's a sense that the culture there is tough but good, and that there's been a constant evolution from, of course, the era that we talked about into some curiosity around '04, '05, and those first Moneyball days of bringing in an analyst, to everything exploding in the StatCast era, to probably pulling it back a little bit now as they've figured out and heard feedback from players and uniform personnel about, like, here's how the analytics need to be implemented, here's where the balance needs to be. So I'd say one thing is just a good open culture there, and another is that constant progress from being an organization that was just as stone age as any other in the '80s to as cutting edge as any other, sometimes perhaps to a fault right now, but always trying to evolve, always trying to stay with the times and stay ahead of the times and get better. Just always trying to move forward and not resting on those Yankee laurels. But that'd probably be a common theme.
Yeah, because you mentioned the players' dynamic to all this, and when it comes to general managers, there's going to be a lot of variables that go into that
Mhm.
answer, player to player. What was that player's experience like in the organization? Did he have a good year? Did he have a bad year? Usually, the guys that have a lot of success in their time with an organization, you get a hold of them a few years later and you ask some questions, usually some positive feedback because everything was good. Nobody had to criticize you. Nobody had to get in your face. And then the guys that had maybe their time in Yankee uniform wasn't so great. You're going to hear it, but that's more the human side of things.
Sure.
Any job, not just Major League Baseball.
Mhm.
Did you find they were the guys you interviewed very forthcoming?
I did. I think, one thing, Brett, and I didn't cover you as a player, but knowing your brother, I wouldn't be surprised if you were like this too, is that if you ask a baseball person the right question and display curiosity, and, you guys are so brilliant at what you do and so thoughtful about what you do that, yeah, I think you can get people to open up. In retrospect, is easier, but I had a great conversation with Garrett Cole and Zach Britton that fills up a whole chapter toward the end, when they were both on the current roster, Britton too, about how analytics are implemented and how it could be better and how it's improved. And I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I find in talking to baseball people, of which I myself am not naturally one, I'm come from the writing side, that if you respect people's intelligence and the work that they do and the pride they take in it, you can get people to open up. And I'd like to think that I did in this case for the most part.
Yeah, this modern era, it's fascinating to me because I'm a baseball purist at heart. I come from that long line of
Sure.
players. But my time ended in the early 2000s, so I wasn't subject to all these new to the analytics and the tremendous amount of technology we have now. I'm not that guy. I'm not that player from 15 years ago that's get off my lawn and it's better when we play. No, I think if you don't embrace the modern game, this game will run you over. It'll go on with or without you. You got to
For
change
sure.
with the game if you want to continue to be a part of it. That being said, you don't have to. My brother and myself, we don't agree on everything. Trust me, we're
Mhm.
very like-minded on the basics and the fundamentals of baseball. We're very like-minded. Some things we differ on, and we don't have fights, but we'll have debates. He'll call me and I'll tell him, I'm telling you why this is wrong, and I don't care what your data says, and he'll make his counterpoint, and we have a nice discussion about some things, and I think I'm right, he thinks he's right. Doesn't mean any one of us are wrong.
Yeah. Do you watch, Brett? Do you watch the Yankee games closely enough where you can get into it like that with him on specific
Yes,
in-game moves and stuff?
I do. Now it's not saying, oh, believe me, Andy, at the beginning when Aaron first started managing,
Hmm.
because I all kidding aside, I think my brother does a wonderful job. I really
As
do.
do I.
And
Mhm.
I'm critical of him, and I'll let him know, and he knows what I disagree with. But I think all in all, when you take the big picture and what you have to deal with in the city of New York, and we had this talk recently. I said, why wouldn't you want to do it there? I said, man, if I could do it one place, I want to be on the hottest stove impossible. I can handle your Twitter guys and your Warriors and your talk show hosts. I don't really care about those guys. If you win in New York, man, you got the key to that city for the rest of your life. I said, why wouldn't you want to manage anybody anywhere but New York? That being said, from the couch, it's much easier when I watch Aaron early in his tenure. And this is when I was worried about players. I've come to realize that the modern day player is a bit different than us. We're still baseball players, always will be, but they're brought up in a different culture. But I was early in his career. I was worried about it. I said, "Listen, Aaron, you really need to keep take into consideration the mentality of each individual. Are they a veteran?" And I remember he pulled a pitcher. It was 3-2 game, 3-1 game, just short of the fifth inning, getting that
Yeah.
when you qualify for the win. And I said, he's going to be. I think it was Tanaka back in the day. I
Mhm.
said, you really got to consider when you take him out before he has a chance to earn that W, the thoughts that are going through his mind, because he's a guy that's you're going to go to every fifth day, and you've got to have him in the right frame of mind. So it was stuff like that early on
Mhm.
that we really talk back and forth about. Now, he's been doing it long enough where he's kind of felt these out. He's failed, he's succeeded. He knows what works. He knows, maybe, hey, I would have done that 2 years ago. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
But
for
but
sure.
it's right. It's really interesting to watch him evolve and just watch him on a daily basis. I'm ultra critical, and you can ask Aaron. I said, Aaron, we understand you protect your players, all right? We get it.
Mhm.
Now, Andy, when I was a player, I was kind of known as the brash one and the one with
Mhm.
the chip on his shoulder, and Aaron was always the nice guy. Oh, Aaron
Yeah.
Boone, nice guy. It's great. I go to the ballpark now. I go in the umpires room. I'm the favorite by far. And oh, we got Aaron tonight. So I tease him about that too. I said, listen, you don't have to argue every ball and strike. Just because it didn't hit that little stupid square doesn't mean you have to scream at him and get
Oh,
kicked out of the
man.
game.
He's
We
funny
didn't
when
have
has he
that.
always been that funny when he's angry, like when he was 8 years old? Because it's very entertaining. I know the umpires don't love it, but the rest of us, it's a good show.
Andy, you hit it on the head when you say, because everybody thinks in sports today it's theater. Some things are premeditated.
Mhm.
I watch Aaron Boone when he gets passionate. That's my 10-year-old little brother that I used to drag along with me. And when we talk about this all the time on the podcast, our childhood, my friends, we're 4 years different. He's 4 years my junior. So, all my buddies, we're 12 years old. Aaron's 8. We, my friends always wanted Aaron to come along because if nothing else, he was entertaining. And now, when we'd be playing sports, we'd be playing pickup basketball or football on the street or street hockey, whatever it may be. If it got too physical for Aaron, he would go to the sidelines and be the announcer, and he'd be Harry Callis. And
Mhm.
so my friends really embraced Aaron and took him in. So he was always with me as a little kid. And I'm telling you, I see him argue, and sometimes I'm like, "Would you quit?" That's not save the bullets for when you really need them. But when he is really getting passionate on the field, and what he does is he's a lot like my father. He reasons. Aaron doesn't really have a bad bone in his body. So really,
Yes.
when he's going out to argue with an umpire, I know how he thinks, and he thinks, okay, I want to be respectful when I do this, but I need to get my point across. And then he gets caught up in the moment, and he can't help himself. That's that little kid that I would tease. Let's say we're playing touch football, and it was a first down, but I'm going to tease Aaron and say that wasn't a first down. You didn't get past the line. Man, I could get him going. Say, Aaron, hey, that's tough, but that's a turnover on downs. You didn't make it past the line, Brett. And he had this little squeaky voice, Brett. I'm telling you, I did, and I well know it was a first down, but I
It's good
need some
stuff.
entertainment. That's the kid I see arguing with umpires now. He hasn't changed a lick. He's the
I love that.
same passionate little brother that I used to bring with me,
Yeah.
to build a fort, to hang out with my buddies, and we had a great childhood. We never fought. It was always that older brother, younger brother thing. We never played together until we were in the big leagues, ironically. But he was always, I was leaving high school, he was entering high school. I was leaving college, he was entering college. But growing up, we really had that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you said, hey, was he like that when he was 8 years old? He's exactly the same person. He's
Well,
just
that's
got some years
fascinating.
on him.
Yeah, that's fascinating to hear, Brett, because his authenticity is both, I think, one of what works for him as a manager, probably as a human being as well, outside of his job. My reporting on why his players have always really loved him because they see an authentic person. Those arguments, even when, I mean, his belief. You talk. I think you alluded briefly to this. I mean, he protects his players, perhaps even you could say to a fault sometimes, but
Oh,
not really
definitely,
because
definitely to a
well, you'll
fault.
say it. Then I didn't. But obviously they appreciate it. But one thing I've noticed about that goes into the authenticity too. Uh, he and I have talk a lot. I'm here in New York covering him. I think we have a good dynamic, the two of us, and so I can speak pretty freely with him. And the only times he's ever really kind of annoyed with me is when I'm saying something that might not be as high on one of his players as he is. Like, for example, I've written this, so I'll say it. I listened to all the scouts over the years that have said Volpe's a fine shortstop, but he is Pedroia at second base. The guy's a second baseman. Now, that may be evolving now, but just to give you an example of this, and I'd say, Aaron, I got to tell you, like I see Peraza at short. He's got that's a 60 arm. Volpe's got a 50 arm. He's a little rangier. Maybe Volpe's a second baseman, and Aaron will really get his back up. Not just saying it because it's what you're supposed to say at a press conference, but like, no, you don't understand. Volpe's special. He's a shortstop, and he'll get a little fire in there, and I'll go, okay, all right, fine. You feel that way, but so when he goes up there in public and defends his players, at least he's not like blowing smoke. He may believe it more than is even real, but I think he really does. Like once you're one of his guys, he really believes in you.
Without a doubt. And you said it. The key there is once you're one of his guys,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll give you a hypothetical, and the player will be remain unnamed. But I'll be pretty honest with Aaron. Aaron and myself, like I said, we think a lot alike. We are on the same page on our baseball ideology. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. Believe me, we like the debate. Aaron will take a little bit of a counter
Mm-hmm.
position to me. I think just to do it and to see if he can argue the other point.
Yep.
I'll do the same things with him. That being said, when you are one of his guys, and it's obvious, the writing's on the wall. I watch these games and I watch them closely when I have the time to sit down and because for me, I want to be up to date. Because first of all, I've got to report on this. I've got to do all the teams in both leagues, but I have a special eye on Aaron. Obviously for family reasons, but I really and the Yankees being the organization they have, so I will pay closer attention and we'll have a conversation and something that is so obvious. I'll say, Aaron, this guy, if you're depending on him, you got no chance. This guy is done as far as being a New York Yankee and being productive in a uniform. I know what you're going to say, but I'm just telling you, you can come back to me a little later and say you were right, Brett, which he never will. He will argue for that guy. Brett, I'm telling you, you're wrong. You're wrong. He's going to come through. I know he's struggling right now, but he will do it. And
He believes it, right? Like he
it's not
means it.
because he's lying. It's
Right. So that's what I'm
because
saying. Yep.
he might be a little delusional in my mind.
Yes.
But it's not because he's lying, it's because they're his guys, and he protects them like almost a father figure.
And the only chance that these guys have, and obviously it's clear that there have been a couple guys who have been on the off ramp of their careers
Mhm,
as Yankees, and Aaron's been not the first to accept that. But if these guys have any chance of succeeding while he's on Aaron's roster, they're gonna have to sense that someone believes in them, right? The
mhm,
second it's sort of like before I was in this business, Brett, I was a high school teacher for a couple years, and the advice I got and that was like, if you treat this class like they're bad, like bad kids, they're gonna act like bad kids.
mhm.
If you believe in them that they're gonna be good kids, they have a chance to do well. Sort of the same, like he has that belief in these guys. And again, like I'm sure that if he were a special assistant or a pro scout, he'd put that hat on because he's got a great eye for evaluation, I'm sure. But when he's responsible for these guys in that role, you're right. He does see the best in them to a point where sometimes you're like, come on. But as I'm sure I guess as you and I have both found, if you try to push back on him, you realize that he really means it, which is cool. And I'm telling you, these players sense it and they know it, and they even if they sometimes know that so and so is done and the manager won't admit it, they appreciate the way he thinks for sure.
Right. No, I mean, I've had conversations. I said, "Listen, nobody's in the room. Nobody's recording this. This is your brother Brett calling from
Right?
San Diego, and I was just checking to see how the kids are doing. You don't have to toe the company line right now. And
Yep.
more times than not, unless he goes silent, then I know I got him. He's
Yeah.
finally admitting it. Other than that, he'll fight you tooth and nail. It's actually fun. It's once again, it's when we were kids, we do the same thing. And I'm the
Yep.
older brother, and I would goad him with stuff I knew wasn't quite true, but he's passionate
Hmm.
about, just to get him riled up, just to get that squeaky voice going. And
That's
yeah,
funny.
he's
But
such
that
a
I'm glad to hear all this because it confirms for me that he's not full of it when he's talking to me. Like he
no,
believes
he's
this
not.
stuff. And
This
I
guy,
hear that too. Yeah, you can tell how authentic he is. Or even, on a more serious note, I don't know if you saw this, but a very well liked Yankees executive tragically lost his wife the other day. Aaron made sure in his pregame press conference at the home opener to mention that, and then he got emotional. Aaron did, and like that's authentic.
it
Or
is.
yeah. So anyway, I think we're saying the same thing, but that is one of his great strengths as a manager. But also, like you've noticed, I've noticed it come along over the years too. I've talked to him about this, so I don't think I'm speaking out of school. Probably when to take out the starting pitcher, whether a little too early or too late, was one of the things he was getting a feel for the first year or two. And
Right.
he's been on point with stuff like that now for several years. So it's not just obviously that he's a nice, empathetic guy, but he's on point as a manager, and that's where I think the New York fans probably, as they would with any manager, uh, will probably, whenever one day he hangs it up, will appreciate that. Like, damn, this guy really, he was a winner. And as with many managers, like we didn't realize how good we had it at the time because it's easy to get caught up as a fan in this move or that move. But he doesn't get the love he probably has earned here. And that's another thing before we move on that I appreciate. There's a quote in this book where he says they were one time when things were really bad last year, the stadium's chanting "Fire Boone" at his back, and I was like, "What was that like for you?" And he said, "You know what I did? I got up on the top step and straightened my back a little higher and stood proud." It's like I, that's cool. That belief in yourself too. So yeah.
Yeah, he's a lot like my dad, who I
Mm,
have. People, I talk about my dad, and yeah, he's quirky and he's kind of a nerd. Uh, Aaron and myself we're a lot alike in our belief and our thought process, but we're completely different people.
hmm
Aaron's a lot like my dad. It's like
hmm
when Dad was managing and Aaron was playing, they butt heads all the time. But
mm,
I had a real professional relationship with my dad where I could separate the father son for that time when it
hmm
came to hitting. Or, Dad, what do you think? Well, Brett, here's what I see the last week and why you're not getting the results you want. And we could really work it out where him and Aaron, they couldn't separate that father son. And on top of that, they're very much alike. But at the end of the day, we're different people. But these are two guys with a tremendous amount of integrity. And
hmm
I talk about my dad this, and I've done it for a long time. What did he teach me growing up? Well, he didn't teach me anything. He didn't teach me how to throw. He didn't teach me how to hit. He didn't teach me how to field. What he taught me to do is how to be a professional. And just because he's my dad, of course, I'm going to be a little bit biased, but he's one of the highest integrity men, not father, not family member. I can separate that. I've ever been around. And as much as we have differences and we argue, and the father son relationship, sometimes like, Dad, you're a clown. But at the end of the day, that's an high intent. I teased my dad and I said, you run a yellow light and you turn yourself in. That's what type of guy my father is. And Aaron, the apple didn't fall far from the tree when it comes to Aaron. And that's the cool dynamic. When you're getting real about things, it's like, as people, I have nothing but the utmost respect, and that's family separate.
That's great.
Um, Give me a little snippet in the book
Mhm.
that's going to grab the audience's attention. Maybe they don't. Maybe everybody listening doesn't
That's
know.
interesting. Well, I have a couple. I have a sort of a fly on the wall account of which Aaron was a part of the night that they thought Judge was going to go to the Giants in the winter meetings, and that's pretty
I got a good
interesting.
story about that, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, that's it. I'd love to hear it because they gave me great access and was kind of with some of the front office and with Aaron during that time. So it's fascinating to see the world thinks that there's like a grand plan, but the Yankees are just freaking out like everybody else trying to figure out what's going on. So that was pretty interesting. And there's also going back a ways, there's a story in there that's new information about how Cashman and Joe Torre kind of broke, which was over, long story short, the implementation of some new cameras in the complex, some new expectations with the pitching program. Ron Guidry, who's beloved as a person, is the pitching coach at the time, 2007. But he wasn't running the pitching program in a way that Cashman and the front office thought was modern. So Cashman and Torre really kind of split over an argument over Guidry and some of the pitching program stuff. And the way I tell that whole story, I think, will be new to Yankee fans. But the Judge stuff for sure was fascinating because you're watching this white knuckle experience of the Yankees wondering if they're going to lose their icon. And I know we were in Southern California too, so I don't know if Aaron was seeing you during that time. But now that I think about it, we were right there in San Diego.
It was we were at the winter meetings.
Yep.
And I was sitting at a table with Adam Katz, Dusty Baker, I think Buck Showalter was there for a minute, and Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just we were catching up, and we talked for about an hour. Cash had stopped by the table, but was moving on, and he looked like he had something on his mind. I told Aaron, and Aaron was you could tell he was a little concerned that he was.
Oh yeah, I was around him that week.
I told Aaron, I said, listen, there's not a chance in hell Aaron Judge is leaving the New York Yankees. I said, let's look at this from a layman's standpoint. He's a New York Yankee. He's essentially the heir apparent to Jeter. He's the new captain, the leader. Assuming the money's the same, why the hell would he go to San Francisco? I said, it's a horrible ballpark to hit. It's cold. Right center is humongous. That's going to take away a lot of home runs for Aaron because Aaron hits the ball the other way. Why would you leave the New York Yankees to be the captain of the New York Yankees and play your entire career for the most historic franchise of all time? There's no chance he's leaving. He's playing it. He's going to play it to the end because he wants that top dollar, and him and his agent. But he's not going anywhere, man. I said, relax. But Aaron had that look on his face like, no, I'm not sure, Brad. I'm not sure. I remember I went out to my car. And I was at the valet because I live in San Diego, and I was done meeting at the meetings. Cash is kind of pacing outside by the car. And I know Brian a little bit. I've had him on this show. But I don't know Brian, more than, hey, Boone, how you doing? Hey, Cash, how you doing? We've had a few conversations in my life. And I just kind of said off the cuff like I normally would. I said, Cash, quit worrying about it. He ain't going anywhere. And he looked at me kind of with that in-between look like, we don't know each other that well, but what do you know that I don't know? And I didn't know anything. That was just my gut, layman, on the ground feeling. I put myself in his position as a player. And especially if he was a fringe guy and in New York kind of liked him, but he wasn't, this guy is celebrated in New York. He is this focal point of that Yankee team. You don't leave that to go somewhere else. You don't, especially when the money's relatively the same.
Well, you obviously turned out to be right. And I just remember they were hoping that was the case. Remember, they were so worried about. I was sitting with Aaron and Adam Katz. Obviously, Aaron's longtime agent, one of the great agents in the game, great person for our listeners. It's not a name that's maybe like overly familiar, but anyway, Adam was there. Tim Naring from the Yankees, a couple other Yankees officials. And they're sort of debating. There was a report that Judge was flying on a charter from Tampa to San Diego. A reporter had put that out. And the Yankees didn't know this. So that's what spooks them. Like, well, wait a minute. Why wouldn't we know if he's coming out here one way or the other? And then I'm watching. It may have been the same place you had your table. There's like that lobby bar restaurant at the hotel in San Diego and some big like TVs behind the bar, I think, or around the room somewhere. And all of a sudden, everyone looks up and Judge is at the Tampa football game, at the Bucks game. And it's like, what's that? What? And everyone starts debating, well, what's he going to do? Go to the football game and get on a red eye? This makes no sense.
Maybe he's going to the Rays.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God. Yeah, you're right. Everyone was freaking out. They didn't know how to interpret it. And then like Aaron's like, should I call him? and someone's like, well, yeah, call him. What the hell? And then it's like, oh, wait, it's 3 a.m. there. That would be a little desperate. So it was almost like this, like, should I call him? Should I not? Like, all these people were so worried. And then within about 24 hours, it worked out, but not before that major scare. There was a report that he's going to the Giants, and the Yankees didn't know whether to believe that. Everyone was really nervous. And then it as you predicted,
As
it
a
went
hitter,
the
no,
only way.
as a hitter, there's no chance he's going there.
Yeah, well, that's
But
a fair point.
once again, Andy, these are the luxuries I have from being on the couch. It's much easier
Mhm.
when I'm on the couch. Like, Aaron,
Yeah.
what are you doing in this position? You can't be
Mhm.
doing this. Easier said than done. When I'm sitting on the couch and I have nothing to lose, nothing to gain, it's no skin off my nose. It's easy to be the greatest manager in the world. It's easy to sit there and tell you when your prized player, a guy that means so much to your franchise, willy nilly, just because I tell you he ain't going anywhere.
Right.
When you're in the seat, like that's my guy, I
Yep.
would assume you have a little bit different perspective than they have. But that's why sometimes being on this side,
Mhm.
it's a lot more fun because
I'm sure.
we can see it with clear glasses because I don't have any emotion in it. I don't have any
Exactly.
skin in the game. So I can just look at things rationally and go, of course this makes no sense. If Judge would have not signed with the Yankees, that would have been one of the most, I don't know, that would have been one of the
It would have
weirdest.
been stunning.
I
Yeah.
would have been so wrong. Like, how could he possibly go there with it, with
Mhm.
everything that's sitting waiting for him in New York? Um, want to know about, from your perspective, how the franchise has changed from Brian's early years,
Yeah,
and I believe he was an intern in '87,
that's right.
from the George Steinbrenner days to the Hal Steinbrenner days.
Well, there's an interesting quote in here from Hal Steinbrenner in the book where he said, everyone I'm paraphrasing a little bit. He says, everyone romanticizes my father, but what they forget is that he was not well liked at all, especially in the 80s. And I think one of the ways that the franchise has changed is that it's just not as volatile, uh, both as a work culture for the people that have to work in that office. That George was really, really tough by all accounts, and he would storm through, and it was not an easy place to work. And also from a stability of the roster. I understand that they won more in the late 90s than they have since. But there were some really, as George was really active in those early 2000s after the dynasty, there were some trends in terms of how they uh, built the roster that were not sustainable and would not have gone to a good place. And Cashman almost left. He actually quit after his deal was up in 2005, and had George had to beg him to come back and say, "What do you need?" And that's when Cashman really took charge and started his own departments, pro scouting and analytics. But prior to that, he's got a deal done with Vladimir Guerrero, and it's like, oh well, George signed Sheffield. What? Things like that. It's like, and Sheffield was a good Yankee, but that's not a good process, obviously. Or
Right.
that Brian's trying to get uh, uh, Miguel Cairo signed, and George signs Tony Womack. I mean, there's so many examples where it became was described to me as like a manic environment where there were so many different people in George's ear. And if Tony Womack doesn't work out, he's screaming at Cashman like, "Wait a minute, George, you signed him," and it was
Right.
just chaos. And when Brian was able to really convince Steinbrenner to let him take charge of everything and shore it up in '05, and then of course George Steinbrenner declines, passes away in 2010, and Hal Steinbrenner is such a different temperament that there's just so much more professionalism and stability now. An angry fan would argue, yeah, and no championships. And fair point. That's a fact, but it's a different game as far as that goes. There's a lot of reasons why it's harder to win a championship. So, and as a company and as baseball ops and as a culture, I would say the Yankees are in a better place now, and they've got continuity. I mean, George is changing managers in the middle of the night like it was nothing in the 80s. And Aaron now has been there since 2018. And those are good things too. You want to have, unless somebody's not good, you want to have continuity. You don't want to knee jerk fire somebody because the team didn't perform up to expectations. So those are some of the ways for sure in which it's changed. It's that stability.
Yeah, and it has to. But I think from a from a front office perspective, if I was in the front office under George, man, that would be tough. I
Yeah.
completely understand that side of it. That being said, the player side, when I was playing, I always looked to George, and I knew it was kind of a circus over there, how he operated, and knee jerk reaction decisions.
Mhm.
But as a player, I always thought one day before I retire, I want to play in New York. I loved going to New York. I loved old Yankee Stadium. Probably my favorite
Mm.
spot. That and Anaheim Stadium were my two favorites. But just going to New York, walking down the street, having New Yorkers screaming at me from the other side of the street that I stink and I'm going to get my ass kicked tonight.
Yep.
But it was in the greatest of way. And then when I'd have a good series, it was the praise like, wow, you did kick our butts today. So I loved everything about New York. And one day at the end, I said, I would love to play for the New York Yankees maybe on my way out. Because the one thing, as much as you've got to give with a George Steinbrenner type, I played for Marge Schott. And
Yeah, that couldn't have been easy either.
that was an adventure, to say the least. But the one thing they have in common, George and Marge, at the end of the day, all their fallacies, all their quirks, they wanted to win.
Yep.
They wanted to win. Marge would charge me. Uh, she would make me turn in my crack bats to get a dozen ordered. I'm in the big leagues. I'm a Cincinnati Red, and I'm turning in like 6 crack bats. And Bernie Stowe, our clubhouse guy, said, "Bern, I need 6 bats." And he's like, "Oh, you only got 5? Yeah, but I need 6." He'd be like, "Oh,
Wow.
we'll get it done." That was how it was when I was in Cincinnati.
Wow.
But at the trading deadline, she'd get that player we needed,
Mhm.
And George, with all the headlines and the page 6 and the outrageous thing. I mean, George would basically say, if you're one of his main guys and you're not playing good, page 6 could read, Boone sucks,
Yeah. Oh,
from
yeah.
George Steinbrenner.
Yeah.
As a player, I wouldn't have minded that. I really
Well, that's
wouldn't, because
interesting.
I knew you wanted to win. And I can put up with a little bit of name calling or whatever in the heat of the battle. But having that owner have your back and he wants to win at all costs, you might have to put up with a little bit, but I'll take that all day long as a player, because I know that window's so short and it is so hard to win. So I
That's a great
appreciated that
perspective.
about George.
There's an
Because
interesting
go
go ahead,
ahead.
sorry.
No,
Well,
no.
there's an interesting quote from Don Mattingly that I pulled from 1988 when from the clubhouse with the media, talking about George, where he said Steinbrenner criticized Mattingly for going to arbitration, and Mattingly said, "You come here, you play, you get no respect. You get money, and that's it. They think money is respect. Call us babies, call us whatever you want. If you don't treat me with respect, I don't want to play with you. They treat you like shit. They belittle your performance." He goes on. So it's kind of interesting because there's that intensity, and in the moment, players are pushing back. And a quote like that you would almost never see today. I mean, it's just everything's kind of hot that in a way that it's not maybe right now. But you're right. There's always that foot on the gas to win. So maybe it takes a certain kind of player. But I also think that side gets forgotten sometimes, where um, guys would get criticized, even a guy like Mattingly, who was like a franchise player, and be like, "What the hell?" I also think George would have fired Cashman and Boone off of last year, which wouldn't have been fair because they're both doing a good job, right? And
Right.
that's an issue. So I don't know. I guess it kind of cuts both ways. That kind of desire to win, right?
Well, I think New York, it is what it is. And I think you made a good point when you said, the fans in New York, the reason I love them is because of their passion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I got to be honest, they're unrealistic. It's not
Hmm.
1940. The Yankees
Mm-hmm.
don't just win every year. I went to the
Mm-hmm.
USC, uh, and the University of Southern California, as far as historically baseball wise, back in the day, they
Mm-hmm.
won the national championship every other year. They've got like 3 times more national championships than any other university. But in modern times, they've got very few because the
Yeah.
times have changed. It's like the Yankees were the big bad wolf back in the day, where the Yankees seemed like they won a World Series every other year. But
Mm-hmm.
that's 2024. That's not realistic. But
Nope.
yet I think, and it's a catch 22 for me, because I think that's why I love Yankee fans, because they're so unrealistic and they're just, we better win the World Series or fire everybody in the world. It's not a realistic view, but I think it's an entertaining view to me, and it's
Absolutely.
how I would love my fans to be if I was on the field. But you can't just win every year. In 2024, there's too much money, there's too much parity, there's too many people moving around. You can't just build that dynasty and just roll. What they went through in the late 90s, people don't understand. Like, well, they did that. I said, I played against all those teams, and I was right in the thick of it. That was a beyond special group of people.
Mm-hmm.
That happens once in a lifetime. Well, and hence the results were 5 World Series or 4 World, whatever it was. That's
Yep.
a special group that comes along once in a lifetime, and that's why you won at it in particular time. I watched Bruce Bochy win 3 World Series in like 12, 14. No, what I forget what it was, 10, 12, and 14.
Yeah.
That's doesn't come along very often. And as a player, that's why we play to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go to a World Series. I never won one. Matter of fact, I got whooped by the Yankees.
That's right.
Those great teams in '99.
Mm-hmm.
But as players, oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. But that's what makes this game great, and that's what makes
Mm-hmm.
the chase of that trophy so great.
And what
And
makes playing in the
my buddies that have rings and multiple rings, I'm
mm-hmm.
envious of.
I
I look at
bet.
my dad. My dad's got 2. One is
Yeah.
as an executive for the Washington Nationals and the 1980 Phillies. That's really cool. My grandpa had a ring. I've got a Connie Mack World Series ring. That's the only thing I've ever won.
Wow. That's something right there. That's a pretty cool thing to have. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in the New York, it may be unrealistic, but it's that intensity. It's complex. It cuts a lot of different ways. It's good and it's bad. It's the people saying fire Boone when he's doing a great job. I think he
Sure.
saved a lot of people's jobs last year. 82 and 80 when it could have been a lot worse. You could argue that was Aaron's best year. People are chanting fire Boone. That's tough, but it's that passion that makes you want to say. You said earlier in this conversation, Brett, that there's something about being in New York. You want to do it here because once you win here, it's that much more special than perhaps anywhere else. I actually had that conversation with Aaron when one of the times in which his deal was up. He was sort of mentioned as in the mix for the Padres at that time. I don't remember what was going on with their situation, but it seemed like a possibility that he could go to San Diego if the Yankees let him go. And I remember saying, like, well, why wouldn't you want to do that uh, after all the stuff that you deal with here? Go there and win, and everyone loves you. And if you lose, no one hates you. And he said the same thing you said. He's like, yeah, you want to do it here. This is the
Of
place to
course
be,
you do.
and which I respect.
It's not even a question. It's not even a
Hmm.
question. Um, you think there is a George Steinbrenner shadow that's always going to be there?
I do. I do. I think that as different as Hal is, um, his family controls, of course, the organization. I think will for quite some time. So this was a strong, powerful, domineering person, even father to Hal and Jenny Steinbrenner, who's involved, and uh, the family. So you have to think that they're trying to honor their father's mandate to winning. I think that among the fans, there's a huge shadow because, like I said, with that Hell quote I told you about, even though he was hated perhaps at the time or strongly disliked at the time by a lot of fans, and they chanted "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead" in 1990 when he got suspended. Even though that stuff is real, he won so often that I don't know how many decades are going to have to go by before the Yankees aren't living under the shadow of that. But it certainly isn't close to that passing either. And by the way, I know you've been to Yankee Stadium. There's that massive George Steinbrenner picture behind the right field bleachers. So his face is literally looming over every game. So yeah, that'll always be a thing with the Yankees. That's a pressure that they play under. Sometimes I'm sure that they would love to be free of that because they're like, damn, we just went to the ALCS. Yeah, we got swept, but we were in the Final Four. Why does everybody hate us? Well, because George Steinbrenner and the expectations that he set up is a big part of it. So it's definitely looms large. I don't see that changing.
You touched a little bit on when they moved on from Joe Torre. You know,
Mm-hmm.
about as popular of a manager in the city of New York that I could imagine, and what he did with those great ball clubs. You moved on to Girardi.
Mm-hmm.
Torre is that, and I know it's a taboo word to use nowadays, that old school, but
Mm-hmm.
he believed you had to consider, and I'm from this belief system, is as much as there is to the analytics in the new way, there's something to be said for knowing uh, one's heartbeat,
Sure.
knowing how each individual is put together and what they're made of. And I can treat this guy this way and I'll get this result. But if I treat that guy this way, ooh, I'm not going to get the same result. There's something to that, I think. I think that's what makes a great manager great, is that gut, that great gut. I think puts you over the edge and makes you a great manager. They moved on to Girardi, obviously. Girardi on to Aaron. Um, interested. The thing that I always think about is before the Red Sox won some World Series, there was always a rivalry with the Yankees and the Red Sox. But how did that change once the Red Sox won for the first time? Because not only were they a rival, because the Yankees were always rivals with the Red Sox, but the Yankees always came out on top, and they just knew, you're not a real problem. But once they started winning, how did that change that? And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the Tampa Bay Rays get into the act, and they become a threat to the Yankees.
That's a great point. It changed everything. 2004, Gene Afterman, who's been Cashman's trusted assistant GM for more than 20 years now, I said, "When did you know that things were changing?" And she said, "Pretty much the moment Dave Roberts stole that base. Of course, about to tie the game there in Game 4 of the 2004 ALCS, Yankees up 3-0. She said, pretty much when he stole that base, we knew that the winds were changing, that it was very powerful back then, like the vibe in the air between the Yankees and the Red Sox. And at that moment, they could feel a shift. And of course, the Red Sox finished the job in 04. The Yankees then realized, Gene actually said to me, she said, we thought everything was the same in 03, but when we look back on it, she said it was only Boone's magic that saved us in 03. So basically, they even got through that one by the skin of their teeth with Aaron's famous home run. And in 04, the tide changed, and it hasn't been the same since. The Yankees, you're going to be forever altered when you're knocked off of your high horse in that way. And I was told, certainly by a lot of people that were there was a change in the clubhouse at that time because the players were like, wow, that didn't happen. It wasn't inevitable. And psychologically, that was tough. That was the first year that A-Rod was in the clubhouse, and there was a dynamic with Jeter that created a whole different tone. That's a whole other thing. So for a number of reasons, that changed everything. And then, now the Yankees and the Red Sox is like a ticket-selling rivalry, but it hasn't been like an emotionally intense rivalry in that way in quite a long time. Yankees-Astros has fit that bill over the last number of years. Because of the real true anger in the organization about the sign stealing and what the Yankees, many people in the Yankees believe is more than just the garbage can and that whole thing. Plus the fact that the Yankees just haven't been able to get past the Astros during this era. So that's been more of a rivalry than Yankees Red Sox, and the Rays too, as you mentioned. That's been a real rivalry. And I know it's stuck in the Yankees' craw big time that the Rays have been so successful on such a shoestring budget. And the Yankees have sometimes one of the worst moments of the last number of years that went over very badly in the clubhouse was when the Yankees used an opener against the Rays in a division series game. I'm sure you remember Jay Happ's a veteran pitcher. Now he's the bulk guy. Everyone's out of sorts, and the Yankees lose the game. And in the clubhouse, Zach Britton told me people were saying, "We're the fucking Yankees. What are we doing?"
Yeah.
So, and that's one that Aaron defended. I haven't asked him about it lately, but I wouldn't. Well, I would ask him before I would say how he feels about it now. But at the time, he defended it vigorously. So that I think was the Yankees getting caught in trying to outraise the Rays. And so they've definitely been in that organization's head at some points.
When Aaron got the job, how did he
Mhm.
get the job?
Well, so, and I tell the story of that in here. Cashman and Girardi, although they have a good personal relationship now, they got out of sync that last year. And Girardi was probably going to go no matter how that season went. Yankees ended up losing in 7 games in the ALCS. Cashman protecting Girardi didn't tell me the whole story, but basically there was something involving honesty and their personal dynamic that got out of line that year. And Cashman said, and Joe chose not to repair it, so I decided to move on. So Girardi's let go after the season. They go through an interview process, and actually, most of the way through it, Cashman's going, "Uh-oh, I shouldn't have fired this guy. I haven't interviewed anybody that's going to be as impressive." Then Aaron Boone walks in, goes through the whole car wash of the analytics people, the communications people, the training staff, like an 8-9 hour interview, whatever it was the first day. And when he was done, Cashman and the front office folks looked at each other and said, like, is that for real? Like, is he really that good? They were just blown away by his personality, his quick answer to everything, his knowledge of the game. And as they went through the process and background checks and asked around and brought him in for another interview, they're like, yeah, he is for real. And he has been so aligned with Cashman, not in a way where he's a puppet. I want to be very clear about that. There's so much more internal debate and pushback that goes on than people probably realize. But they're aligned in a way that there's mutual respect. And Cashman thinks he's a terrific manager. And the players have liked him. He's got a touch with the players that is, I don't think it's fair to compare him to Girardi. I don't know that Aaron would want that, but I see players 1 through 26 feel that Aaron's paying attention to them and knows them. And I don't know if that's common in managers, both of the Yankees and all around the league. So he got the job because they suspected he had those qualities, and it's played out that way. They've been very happy with his work, despite the fact that they all want to be in a World Series so bad that it's killing them in a way. But they think they have the right leader for that. And, it's one example. He just walked in there like, wow. And they didn't hardly know each other. I'm sure you know this, but Brian's only memory of Aaron was like he and Adam Katz did the right thing when he hurt himself playing basketball all those years ago. He remembered that he was ethical about that and admitted what happened. But other than that, they hardly knew each other. So it was really just winning the interview process is how he got that job.
Yeah, and you're right. It goes back to I remember because as a brother when that happened when he I alluded earlier to my dad turning himself in for running a
There you
yellow
go.
light. When
Yeah.
that happened with Aaron, I knew what Aaron was going to do. It wasn't hey Brett, what should I do? I knew that question wasn't coming. I knew
Mm-hmm.
it was Aaron, and I knew what he was going to do. He's going to go to Cashman, even though I believe at the time he had a $5 million contract, and he was going to be honest with him because that's what Aaron does. That's what Bob Boone does. That's what they do. And I'll definitely think that Cashman remembers stuff like that because I
Oh,
think
yeah.
if not too many players, and I'm not sure to say not too many people in life with something like that on the line would completely come clean. There's not too many people, at least I know, and that's not
Yeah.
saying like our society is doomed, but that's just not human nature. Human nature is to okay, how can I kind of tell them, but
Sure.
without losing everything. So
Sure.
I
Five
think
million
that
bucks is nothing to sneeze at.
yeah
I agree with you. I don't know what I would have done in that situation, but that's a good example of good karma coming around, right? Because then he
without a doubt, it's the
ends
greatest
up
thing
in
he's
that position.
come to find out. It's the greatest honesty move he ever made.
That's true. That's true. And Cashman,
Uh,
I know that that's helped him get through because, like I said, it was a trust thing with Girardi that got out of whack at the end. And I've been talking to Brian Cashman about Aaron Boone now for how many years? Is this year 7?
yeah.
And it's been universally positive, even when things have been rocky. He trusts the guy, and that's how he's one of the reasons why he's held on to the job.
The name of the book is The Yankee Way. Where can everybody get it?
It's out on May 21st everywhere, but you can go online and pre-order it now, Amazon or wherever you order books, and it'll be delivered to you right then on the 21st. So please do.
All right, Andy, before I let you go, we're going to touch a little bit because what you do outside of writing best selling novels,
Hmm.
uh, your day job is covering New York
Cover these
sports.
teams. Yep.
And I want to dive a little bit in, just touch on. I just got back from Cincinnati. I had a couple days where I was out there doing some meet and greets and throwing out a first pitch in Cincinnati, my old kind of alma mater, the Cincinnati Reds. They were playing the Mets at the time, and I got
Hmm.
to talk to Aaron's old bench coach, Mr. Mendoza, and
Mendoza.
a couple buddies of mine. Eric Chavez, who I played with for years. We were discussing their team, their situation. Not the greatest start, not the starts the Mets envisioned. Give me a quick snapshot what you're seeing with the Mets this year, and in that division, which atop of it is the Atlanta Braves. What's your outlook for the 2024 Mets?
Well, the division's going to be tough. Obviously, you watched the Mets stabilize themselves pretty nicely, not perfectly this past weekend against the Reds, but if you saw that eighth inning on
I
Saturday.
I did where Steer
Yeah.
hit the homer.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. And there was a lot that's just little defensive things that make you go, uh-oh. Like, for example, Pete Alonso doesn't really reach somehow like a relay throw and the runners advance. I mean, little things like that, right? Everything's going wrong and it's like, uh-oh. And it felt like a challenge for Carlos Mendoza, who, uh, look, this is a real baseball guy. I don't know if you've gotten to know him in the time that Aaron's been with him, with Mendoza, but he is tough and good baseball guy. And it was like, this is a challenge for him this moment because the team is looking not totally on point. And they came out and they won Sunday. That doesn't mean everything, but it was a nice turnaround for them. They start 0-4. A lot of the little things were ugly. And they've been underplaying their talent level. Actually, they're a talented defensive team, and that should be a strength. but for some reason it wasn't clicking in the early going. So they're going into Atlanta this week, and that's been a house of horrors for the Mets since you played. But that they are out of crisis mode because they have a good team. They have talent. Lindor turned it on in Cincinnati. That helps. They got a couple of decent starting pitching, or better than decent starting pitching efforts. But also, I think they have a manager who is going to keep them on track. For a rookie manager, he has a ton of presence, and that's going to help them. I don't necessarily think that we see big things for the Mets this particular year, but you never know. I just said the same thing about the Diamondbacks 12 months ago, and they end up in the World Series. So it's as hard as it is to have a dynasty now. It does happen that okay teams get hot and run the table in October. But the Mets are building something, and they're in year one of having the leadership team in place. So I think that's kind of where they're at.
Yeah, and there's a lot of what ifs with the Mets. When is Senga coming back?
Right.
To make a legitimate run, you got to have him back.
Yep.
Alfonso has to have a big year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lindor, he starts 1 for 31, kind of started to right the ship a little bit in Cincinnati, but that's got to really click. Your stars really need to step to the
Yeah.
forefront.
Yes.
But it'll be interesting to watch the Mets, especially in that division. And you talk about the Atlanta Braves; they're in, without the the 4 World Series, they kind of have a dynasty going right now. I
Yeah.
mean, as good as that team is year in and year out, and top to bottom, that organization is just a first class organization. And man, they're really good. And I watch them, and I watched your Arizona Diamondbacks recently this past series with the Atlanta Braves, and they had them down, and the Braves came back and got them twice. And it's like down 8-4, and all of a sudden it's 9-8. So that
Yeah.
team, they've got so many weapons and so many ways they can beat you. It's going to be
Yep.
interesting to watch. Let's switch over to the American League East, and we're going to talk about the Yankees, what you've seen on the ground, what you're thinking. Loaiza, I looked at it at the beginning of the season. Cole goes down. That's about as big a blow
Yeah.
to an organization, and I think Aaron Judge, in my eyes, is the most important to his particular team in all of baseball.
Mhm.
I think Garrett Cole, there could be an argument made that he's the most important pitcher to his team
Oh
in
yeah.
all of baseball. So that he
Yeah.
goes down early. Loaiza, I heard the news the other day, he goes down. Tell me what you're feeling on the ground.
Well, you're right. The Loaiza thing was tough. Although as electric as he is, 99-mile-an-hour sinkers, good off-speed stuff. They've been used to him being hurt, unfortunately, for
Right.
years. He was going to step into that Michael King role this year and be important there. But I guess what I'm saying is it's not the first time they've had to manage with Loaiza has been out for a health reason. So, and as you know, the Yankees front office is so good, and I should say front office is particularly the pro scouting department is so good at identifying these relievers. They have Ian Hamilton right now. They had a rough one the other day, but unbelievably effective reliever who was just a guy when the Yankees. They find these guys, they target them. Aaron's got a great pitching coach in Matt Blake who helps them along with the analytics team of coming up with how to use your pitch mix. And so I think they'll be all right in the bullpen because they know how to create relievers and help good relievers become really, really good relievers. And just as an offense, they even without big contributions for some guys, Judge started slow. Verdugo has started pretty slow. There's some other guys. They just grind pitchers like those 90s Yankees did in a way that I haven't seen an Aaron Boone team quite have the personnel for that yet. Uh, Soto, I don't know if it's contagious or if it's just the personnel they have happens to look like Soto's helping to revitalize that offense, but they all see so many pitches. Even on Friday, their home opener, they were shut out. They had Yusei Kikuchi, the Blue Jays starter, at 70 pitches in the third inning. I mean, they let Kikuchi settle in that particular one, but the offense just doesn't quit. Volpe's taking a big leap forward. They just feel to me like, I don't want to say slump proof because that's too strong. But the characteristic I think they have in an offense where they take these patient grinding at bats, that's not going to slump as easily, right? It's not like a feast or famine thing. That's these guys' approach. So I think this is a good team, good offense. Cole will be back. I agree they need him to get to the World Series and to win it. They probably need him to be Cole. But I'm hearing good things there. They seem optimistic about how he's progressing to this point. So I don't know. I think this is a good team. I think given the mediocrity around the league and the improvements in the Yankees, this is a year where if it breaks right, some special things could happen for them.
Well, and for me, and it's not any different than any other ball club out there. Injuries,
Yeah.
staying healthy is the most important part. And the closer eye I've kept on the Yankees since Aaron's taken over, it's been decimated by injuries. And you talk
Yep.
about a Loizaga, there used to be him being hurt, but yeah, they're also used to having King in the bullpen too. Now King's
Right.
gone. Now the great part is you got Soto, and that's going to be a huge piece. And I think he's going to have an MVP caliber year.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubts if Soto and Aaron Judge stay healthy. I think Aaron Judge, a healthy Aaron Judge for 160 games, I think
Mm-hmm.
he's the best. He's the best, most dynamic offensive player in all the game, and that's everybody included.
Yeah,
He's
and a
the
hell of
only
a
guy,
right fielder, or hell of an outfielder too.
hell
Not
of an out.
bad.
He's the
Yeah.
only guy I know that's maybe capable of hitting 70 home runs
Mm-hmm.
and hitting 320. There's only one person on the planet I think can do that, and that's Aaron Judge. So I'd love
Mm-hmm.
to see him stay healthy. I think Stanton's the key. I think
Mm-hmm.
a healthy Stanton that can just add a presence in the middle of that lineup like he can when he's right. I think that's huge for them.
Yep.
But it'll be interesting. Stroman so far has done a great job. I
Very
think
good.
Stroman, what he is. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove to everybody because he likes to talk. He wants to prove everybody that hey, I'm going to come to New York and do what I said I'm going to do. I think that's a great thing, and he's
Mm-hmm.
motivated to put him in the middle of that. Rodon, interesting. Looking at the rest of the American League East, what do you think? There's a lot of talk about this Oriole teams. I'm not buying it yet. I think they're
Yep.
good, but I'm not buying this greatness. I look at the if you want to compare an Orioles to an Atlanta Braves team or a LA Dodger team as far as star power, Orioles got a lot of young great players. But when you start talking about the greats, I don't think the Orioles stack up. I think they're going to be really good. Your thoughts on the Orioles, the pesky Rays? They're going to be there. They do it every year.
They do.
Uh,
I'm with
Boston
you.
and Blue Jays.
I'm with you on the Orioles. I think they have still a lot to prove, and their fans are happy about the sale of the team. Obviously, thrilled about last year and the young players coming up. But let's just see. The Yankees have a lot of veteran guys who know what they're doing, and so I'm interested to see how that battle shakes out. Two very good teams, but I'm with you that uh, they had a good year last year, but kind of got to see it with the Orioles. And sometimes as we've seen from almost any prospect, whether it be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Volpe last year, or there's so many. You have a team full of young, promising players. That's great, but sometimes it takes a few years for guys to develop, and sometimes that core, like with the Blue Jays, doesn't come along exactly as you thought it would.
Right.
So we'll see how that goes. I agree with you on the Rays. It's a little harder to see on paper how they do it this year. But I've said that before. Everyone's said that before, and they've always
Everybody,
found a
it's
way.
I
Yeah,
I I don't even we do a preseason show, your picks, and I will never count them out again
same.
because I
Yep.
count them out all the time, and the turnover there, I just think it's a tip of the cap to them. I just think they've developed some sort of culture in Tampa
Hmm.
Bay where, hey, we don't have the money of the big time franchises, but when you walk into this locker room in spring training, there's something that says, "Hey, I'm a Ray. We're going to win. We go to the postseason.
Yep.
It's what we do." Now they haven't finished the deal and won a World Series, but I'll tell you what, they're a pain in the neck, and I know they've been a nemesis for the Yankees over the years.
Oh yes, that's for sure. And I think they'll figure out a way to be very competitive this year. The Red Sox are interesting because they've started so strong. Again, hard to see it on paper. Uh, Very interesting dynamic there with Alex Cora and a contract year, widely acknowledged as a great manager. They haven't given him the pieces, but they're playing over their skis a little right now. So that's interesting. But really, I think probably this year that division is Yankees Orioles. I think the Yankees are in a good spot. I mean, you never, as you said, it comes down to health. If Aaron Judge bangs his toe, or if Garrett Cole doesn't recover, or a number of things that make all the experts ultimately look wrong. But there have been years over the past handful of years where you look at it and you go, this one's going to be tough for the Yankees in this division. And this year, I do think there's a path in the whole American League for them.
Well, Andy Martino, I appreciate you coming on the Boom Podcast. It's been a lot of fun. I got a lot of information. Go get his book, The Yankee Way, coming out in May. Um, Thanks for all the insight, man. It was a lot of fun catching up. I got to ask you before you leave.
Yeah.
Uh, I rumor has it you have a problem cutting your steak.
Oh, jeez.
Give me the story behind that. That's what I'm hearing.
Your brother has an eye for detail, man. We're at the winter meetings, and it was the middle of the Soto talks, and this past year, and everyone's all stressed out. Again with the Yankees, are we getting Soto? Da da da. I'm sitting at a quick dinner. There's a steakhouse in that property in Nashville at the bar with Jim Duquette, who I work with at SNY, just having a quick steak. We got to get back to work after that. Boone and Matt Blake and Tim Neering come in, and we're chatting for a second. And Aaron just looks down. He's like, "You cut steak really weird." I'm like, "What?" And I look down, and I'm like, "Huh." And I'm doing the way I'm doing. He's like, "You look like you're sawing at it like a little kid." And I'm thinking about it, and everyone's starting to laugh. And all of a sudden, Blake goes, "You're gonna give him the yips." And I just froze, and I tossed the knife and fork down on the plate, like, "Well, shit, I can't cut." You completely got in my head. I became Chuck Knobloch in 2000. I couldn't even do it anymore. And then, so everyone has a good laugh at my expense. Now we're 5 months later. He still will tell everyone clearly that'll listen about this. And then I get home from the winter meetings and said, "You're not going to believe what happened," to my wife. And she said, "Oh yeah, you've always cut steak weird. I just never said anything about it." So he was right. He's a good evaluator.
And that's what Aaron does. He likes to point out stupid stuff
thing
like that, but he does.
And now I can't eat. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to eat in front of him. In fact, I had a nice dinner with him in spring this ever since, and I did not order the steak because, man, he was on me from the minute we sat down. He's like, "I can't even do this in front of you." So he's got in my head. Glad to hear that he shared that with you.
Yep, we definitely did. All right, Eddie, appreciate it.
This is fun. Thank you,
all
Bret.
you out there now watching the Boone podcast, the Bret Boone podcast on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. For those of you listening, until next time, keep it right here. I'm Bret Boone. We'll see you then.